Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Ask Abhijit show. I hope everybody is doing fantastic. And before we begin, let me see who all is there on the live chat. I will greet some of you, and then we shall begin with the Q and A. I can see Bharat first, Gear X, uh, Krishna Raghunath from the Surinamese Netherlands, Anand Pai, Animish, Danish Khan, Pawan Kumar Singh, Trupti Patel, Rigzin Rigzin Dorje, Philip, Geopolitical Dube, America is best. Akshit, Mr. 88ers, Shri Ramchandraya Namaha, Prabhunath, the world teacher, Vivekananda Panda, Super Rex, Feminist Slayer, Brijesh SK, Gautami, Akash, Geopolitical Dube, Vikram Geopolitical, Rajashekharan Vichattu, Brijesh Vishnu Mohanan Manka Garage, Tour Master, Vitvik Martinez, The King, Phantom Deluxe, Kush Abu Drawing and Art, Kushbu Drawing and Art, Ansh Pratap Singh, Ati Ugra, Tejas B, Mohini Sharma, Jyotsna Tomar, Rishikesh Das Gupta, Akash BA, Sambhav Tiwari, Nikhil Yadav, Sahil Das Gupta, Bhargav S, Saurabh Shukla, Prakhar Gupta, Anupam Jaiswal, Ritwij, Surinder Gupta, Abhijit M, Chetan Deshpande, Yash Chadav, Shailaja, Janvi, Vedang Mishra, MK, Rajarshi Gon, Super Rex, Karthik Bhatt, Manu Gowda, Sergeant Skylan, Crazy Brain, Sandhya, Prexan, and so many other people. Yeah, Pranay Paul, Devik Shriyan, Sandy 97, Karthik Bhatt, Avinash, and everybody else. All right, greetings to all of you. I will not be able to greet you all individually, so let's get into the Q&A. And I usually take geopolitics questions first. For a change, let's change things around and let's take history first, shall we? So let's take some questions about history, and then we'll move to geopolitics after I'm done with a bunch of history questions. So let's go. What's question one? Question one is by Yajnavalka. Was the Thar desert ever always a desert? If not, how long ago was it green? Okay, the Thar desert. Let's take a look at the Thar desert. For that, we should take a look at the map. So where's the map? Here's the map. And here's the map. So let's take a look at where the Thar desert is. It's in western India, mainly the Rajasthan, Sindh region. Sindh currently part of Pakistan, but you know what I mean, right? So let this load. So you can see that there's this big region over here that's pretty arid, and there's not much green here, right in the middle of the screen. So that's essentially the Thar desert. Not all of it is the sandy desert with sand dunes. Much of it is just arid landscape. But this region roughly is the Thar desert region. Now the question that's been asked is: was this always a desert? And if not, how long ago was it green? Uh, so I believe that the Thar desert this region became desertified about 20 or so thousand years ago, during the last glacial maximum. So we recently, in geological terms, have emerged out of an ice age, and the glacial maximum, the last one, which is the peak of the ice age, was about 20,000 years ago, roughly. And at that time, if you go north of the Himalayas, we have the large region which is Tibet, and all of that was encased in sheet ice, all ice, just ice, hundreds of meters, maybe kilometers thick, possibly. So just north of the Himalayas, you had these gigantic ice sheets. And the ice sheets, what they do, first of all, the planet was very cold because of the ice age. And the ice sheets, they would reflect away sunlight. And because of that, for a very long period of time, there was no rainy season in India for tens of thousands of years. No rainy season. So because there was no rainy season, this place became quite arid because of the lack of lots of rivers in this region. There was only one major river that flowed through this region for a long time, and that was the Saraswati. So the Saraswati used to flow through this, but apart from its river banks, everything in the region was pretty dry and arid. So I'm not sure when it was last green, but it was arid during the last ice age. And then about two and a half, about 2000 BC, 2500 BC, maybe around that time, the Saraswati started dried out to a large extent. And that caused further desertification of the Thar desert region. And now the Saraswati only flows in northern India. It's called the Ghaggar Hakra River, and it kind of dries out or flows into the Rajasthan desert, the Thar desert, and disappears over there. So at some point in time, it may have created a lake kind of thing. With the drying of up of the river, as it was no longer able to reach the ocean. As you can see, here's the drainage channel of the Saraswati. It's still visible about 4 5,000 years after the river disappeared, but the drainage channel is still visible in the geological data. So, because the river was no longer able to reach the sea, it would have created a big lake-like structure where the Thar Desert currently lies, and that's what would have caused the emergence of the desert. For example, something similar happened in the Aral Sea. So, this is the Aral Sea region, and if you look at the map, what does it say? It no longer says the Aral Sea, but there used to be a big sea over here, and the Soviets, because of various agricultural and other practices, drainage practices, they kind of led to the destruction of the Aral Sea. So a big giant inland lake, the Aral Sea, completely disappeared, and you have a desert there now, where the lake bed once lay. This entire region was a big giant lake until the 70s and 80s, 1970s, 1980s. So once the lake disappears, what's left behind is a desert. So something similar happened over here as well, the Thar Desert. So it wasn't always a desert. I'm not sure how long ago it was green, but I can tell you that after the demise or the drying out of the Saraswati in this region, the Thar Desert, this region became properly desertified and pretty arid. So that's the story of the Thar Desert. Interesting question to begin with. Let's take a different question now. Vikram Geopolitical says, why was Australia, being such a large continent, why was it still not discovered until the 1600s? The Cholas used to rule Indonesia, and Australia is not very far from there. So when we talk about the discovery of a land or a continent, we put ourselves in the shoes of the Europeans, right? We talk about the European discovery of the world. The Europeans discovered Australia sometime around that time. There was a privateer or pirate called James Cook. Well, he's regarded as one of the great explorers, but so that's the guy who discovered Australia, James Cook, if I'm not mistaken. He discovered it for the British and for the Europeans. Does it mean it's the first time humans ever discovered the place? First of all, the native Australians, the Aboriginal Australians, the original true indigenous people of Australia, they discovered Australia about 60, 70,000 years ago, and they settled there. Now, they are not the only people who discovered Australia. So let's go to our friend Google and let's ask Google, let's Google something, shall we? Here is the deal. So, Indian DNA Australia. Very simple question. Indian DNA Australia. So let's go to the Scientific American article. Open up. So genomes show Indian influx to Australia 4,000 years ago. Some Aboriginal Australians can trace as much as 11% of their genomes to migrants who reached the island about 4,000 years ago from India. And along with their genes, the migrants brought different tool-making techniques and the ancestors of the dingo, the Australian wild dog. If you look at the Australian wild dog, the dingo, it looks just like the standard issue Indian street dog. So the ancestor of the dingo came from India. Now let's go to a different article. We looked at Scientific American. Let's look at Nature. Nature. Cookies. No option but to accept the cookies. All right. Nature. Aboriginal Australian genomes reveal Indian ancestry. The flow of genes suggests the continent was not so isolated after all. Northern Australian Aboriginal people can trace as much as 11% of their genomes to migrants who reached the island about 4,000 years ago from India. And along with their genes, the migrants also brought more advanced tool-making techniques and the ancestors of the dingo. And they say these are this is Indian DNA, not North Indian or South Indian DNA. Hmm? It doesn't say North Indian DNA or South Indian DNA. It says Indian DNA, which tells you that Indian DNA is the same, whether it's north, south, east, west. So it's clear that our people discovered, let's say, Australia way before the Europeans. But we are not taught this. I mean, this research came out in 2013. Today, it's what, 12 years later, 2025? Do our textbooks teach our students about this? No, they don't. Our textbooks are outdated, obsolete. Our education system is obsolete. Anyway, I will not go into that. So the point is, Indians settled in Australia, intermarried with the Aboriginal Australians, brought in new advanced tool making techniques and other technology, and brought in the Indian dog. So they traveled with dogs, Indians. And these dogs eventually became wild in Australia. They became feral, and they are now called dingoes. They look just like the Indian dog. And forget about. So my point is, let's not see the world through the eyes of the Europeans, shall we? That's what is inculcated into our minds, because our entire education system it teaches you history from a Eurocentric perspective. So we discovered Australia, if you want to call it discovery, way before the Europeans, and there's clear evidence of that in northern Australia. So let's look at the map of Australia, since we are talking of Australia. So here's the map. So you can see Australia is very far away from India, and you need to go by sea. You can do island hopping you can travel by land from India to Myanmar to Suvarnabhumi, which is Thailand, to Malaysia, present day Malaysia, into Indonesia. You can do a little bit of island hopping and come close to Australia, but eventually you're going to have to cross the sea. So we don't know what route the ancient Indians took to reach Australia, but they did reach Australia, northern Australia to be specific, and settled there. So that is what happened a very long time ago. And that's around the time, about 4,000 years ago, around the time that the Saraswati starts drying out. And the big Saraswati Sindhu area, which was densely populated, people start migrating out of it, east, west, wherever. So a bunch of people go westwards, and they settle in. We know that they settled in northern Syria, Anatolia, the Mitanni. They created the Mitanni Empire. They were Indians. They spoke Sanskrit. They were Indo-Aryan in origin, and other regions as well, westwards. We have the advent of Indian cattle in the West Asia region, in Egypt as well, about 4,000 years ago. And at the same time, we have Indians arriving in Australia 4,000 years ago. Interesting period of time. It looks like there was a time of great churn in India. So around 4,000 years ago, there was a tremendous churn in India. The Saraswati is drying out. It's like something that's not happened in thousands of years. It completely reshapes Indian civilization, Indian demographics, the way people, the regions in which Indians have settled, and this migration out of the Saraswati Sindhu, Sapta Sindhu region, and Indians migrate all over the place. So we know they settled in West Asia, Mitanni Empire, the Hittites, they were Indians. The royalty was Indian, the aristocracy and the warrior class was Indian, and Australia as well. So forget about the Europeans. We discovered Australia a long time before them. Geopolitical Dubey says, is Emperor Ashok mentioned in the Rajtarangini as a follower of Jainism, and why did he hate the aajiivikas? Okay, so the Rajtarangini is a 1100s text, 12th century text, written by Kalhan, who was a northern Indian, Kashmiri chronicler, historian. So Kalhan was a Kashmiri historian. He wrote this text, the Rajtarangini, which is essentially a record of the lineage of our king, our royal family's kings, all that. It's a record of our history, and he wrote it in Sanskrit, and that's called the Rajtarangini, the flow of the royal dynasties of India. So in this, Kalhan mentions Ashok, of course. He mentions Ashok as a follower of Jinnah. It sounds like Jain, like he's Jain. He's being described as a Jain in that. Maybe it's possible that maybe the word Jinnah was used to describe Buddha and the Buddhist thing as well. We're not quite sure. It's a little confusing. So yeah, he does mention Ashok as a follower of the Jinnah, and he also mentions that Ashok is the king or emperor who constructed Srinagar. So I'm not sure. I mean, Srinagar can refer to, I don't know. We know there's one Srinagar in northern India and Kashmir. But I'm sure in the past there could have been multiple cities called Srinagar. So it's a little confusing what's mentioned about Ashok, Emperor Ashok in the Rajtarangini. But yes, he's mentioned as a follower of Jinnah. Now I'm not sure how to interpret Jinnah, either as being a follower of the Jaina Pantha or a follower of the Bauddha Pantha. Not sure. It's a little confusing. Uh, why did Ashok hate the aajiivikas? The aajiivikas were one of the ancient philosophical schools of thought of Dharma, or one of the ancient Dharmic philosophical schools of thought. It no longer exists, and we don't even have their texts. So their texts have disappeared. We don't know a lot of detail about their philosophy. Uh, I believe that the aajiivikas believed in superdeterminism. You know, the Big Bang. I mean, we'll not go into physics, but superdeterminism is a concept in physics, in theoretical physics, that the Big Bang happened and everything. I mean, if you can calculate the positions and momentum, etc., and positions and momenta of all the particles at or just after the Big Bang, then you can calculate everything that happens in the future with a little bit of uncertainty thrown in. So that's super determinism, and the uncertainty is purely random. It's quantum mechanical. So that is the super determinism of physics. Now, the aajiivikas had this concept of super determinism, that everything is determined in the beginning, and there is no free will. Whatever we are doing right now has already been determined. So the past, present, and future are already determined, and there is no free will. They believed in the existence of the Atma, soul, and it was, but they did not believe in God, perhaps. So that's the kind of philosophy they had. They also had an atomic theory. So Vaisheshik probably borrowed atomism, perhaps from Ajivika. I'm not sure. Now, it is said that Ashok persecuted the Ajivikas and had several thousand of them executed. I'm not sure how true this is, but one hears this claim being made. I'm not sure what the basis of the claim is. I'm not going to research it right now. Uh, it is said that apparently somebody made a derogatory drawing or representation of Gautam Buddha as bowing down to one of the leaders of the Ajivikas or something like that, and maybe that enraged Ashok, and that's why he had several thousand of them killed. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that maybe it was a political thing. Maybe the Ajivikas had thrown their weight behind his political opponents, which would have been one of his brothers or half brothers. That's another possibility. The third possibility is that this never happened, because we know that if you go to Bihar, okay, in eastern India, and there is something called the Barabar Caves complex, the Barabar Caves, and these caves. I mean, it's not just these caves were not built in a single go. It is believed that Ashok built one phase of the caves, and his one of his descendants, Dasharath, I believe, Dasharath Maurya, built another phase or another section of the caves. And there are inscriptions that lend credence to this theory. Now, these caves were used by the Ajivikas. So why would Ashok build caves for the Ajivikas if he was their enemy and if he hated them? So it's so it's a little confusing, and we're not quite sure what the truth is. I'm not sure if it's true that Emperor Ashok persecuted the Ajivikas, and the Ajivikas did continue as a sect, as a philosophical school of thought of the Dharmic umbrella, well into the Gupta era. The Gupta era is about 4th century to 6th century roughly, AD, more or less. give or take. Look it up, exact what the exact dates are. So they existed during the Gupta era, the golden age of India, and they may have existed beyond the 10th century AD also, perhaps. But today, the Ajivika philosophy no longer exists. Nobody follows it, and nobody even knows the details of it. Right. So yeah, when it comes to ancient history, there's a bit of ambiguity and a bit of yeah, that sort of thing. So we're not quite sure if Ashok actually really hated the Ajivikas and if he really did persecute them or not. Krishna Raghunath Suri from Suriname, Netherlands, says recently archaeologists from southern India have discovered and confirmed that the Iron Age in the subcontinent is older than 3000 BC. What do I think about this? I think it's not surprising, and I think it's wonderful that we've discovered something new for a change in India from the archaeological perspective. So it was well known for quite a while that crucible steel was being forged in southern India at least around 500 BC, maybe probably before that. So crucible steel is also called Serric steel or Woods steel or Damascus steel, because Damascus used to import the steel ingots from India and then make Damascus swords from that. So the Westerners named it Damascus steel, but it came from India. So this steel, you need a very specific technique, and maybe the technique was lost or is lost. But you need a very specific technique. You want to see what this steel looks like? It's very interesting. Let's Google this. Let's go to our friend Google, and let me put that on the screen. Okay, Woods steel. So if you look at the kind of steel it is, I mean, it's got a very distinctive pattern. As you can see, there are lots of examples of this. It's got a very distinctive pattern. And this, the crucible steel from ancient India. So there you have it. That's the kind of pattern you get from this steel. And it was very highly prized in the ancient world. It's still prized today. I mean, people have recreated probably the technique, but the original technique probably is lost because the British deindustrialized India during their 250 years of occupation of our land. Anyway, so we know that Woods steel or Serric steel or Indian crucible steel was being forged at least around 500 BC. And probably the Iron Age dates before that, because you need to refine your techniques to be able to forge steel, which is an engineering technique. So now we know that the Iron Age is actually older than 3000 BC. So, not surprising. I'm telling you, if we do archaeology properly, then we're going to find so much more of our ancient history. So, I think it's wonderful. I think it's not surprising at all. And I think this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to archaeological discoveries from ancient India. If we truly empower and unleash the ASI or an archaeological department across India, we're going to find mind boggling discoveries. This is just the beginning. So, yeah. Okay, the next question is by Yajnavalka. 1. Was there agriculture and cities in India, let's say, for 40,000 years ago? Second, is it possible that Homo erectus or the Neanderthals or the Denisovans engaged in agriculture and built cities? Let's take the second question first. It's possible that Homo erectus or Neanderthals or Denisovans may have engaged in some kind of agriculture. It's possible. We don't really have the evidence for it, but it's possible. We know that Neanderthal burials have been discovered, which contain traces of flower pollen, which means that the individual who was buried and flowers were deposited on the body and around the body. So that is a very interesting funerary practice. It shows love and affection for the person who died. It's very similar to what people do today. They place graves place flowers and bouquets on graves. You put flowers on funeral pyres in India, and that sort of practice is common today among us Homo sapiens. The Neanderthals were our close cousins, so they also had this. So that's something that was similar, that they shared with us, something similar with us. And about agriculture, we don't quite know. We haven't seen evidence of that, but it's certainly possible. About cities, maybe, but we haven't discovered any. So one can keep an open mind and keep the possibility open that maybe they did, maybe we had found those for whatever reason, but the evidence isn't there. Now, let's come back to the first question. Was there agriculture in cities in India 40,000 years ago? Okay, let's talk about agriculture in India. And let me put an article on the screen. This is an article by Dr. Anil Suri from 2018. One second, let me put that on the screen. So, this is a good primer on how old Indian agriculture is. So, let's just read a bit of this. It's common knowledge that food production in the northwest part of India, of the subcontinent, began with the Mehrgarh Neolithic in the early 7th millennium BC. The 7th millennium BC is about, let's say, 7,000 BC. Okay. What's less known is that there were many independent centers for the development of agriculture on the subcontinent. There is evidence of rice being used as food on the Ganga plains from 13,000 years ago. 13,000 years ago, our ancestors were using rice in the Ganga plains. Okay, that's 13,000 years ago. The banks of the Lahura Deva Lake in eastern Uttar Pradesh, some stunning insights have come in from there. So carbonized rice grains dating as far back as 11,000 BC, etc., were discovered there. That's what we're talking about. So it looks like rice cultivation actually emerged in India, not in China. Now, what else do we have? We have more evidence of that. Lahura Deva wetland. So Lahura Deva Lake region had the dwellers of this place had progressed to wetland rice cultivation 9,000 years ago. What else do we have? Okay, we are done with Lahura Deva. Now let's talk about the oldest evidence that we have, okay, of agriculture. So that goes all the way down south to Sri Lanka. So, and why are we talking about Sri Lanka when we're talking about India? Because at that time, Sri Lanka was physically connected to the Indian subcontinent because of the Ice Age. So it was not separate as an island. It was connected to the subcontinent. It was part of the subcontinent. So there's evidence of in the Horton Plains National Park in Sri Lanka, there is evidence of cattle herding and grazing, micro charcoal indicating the use of fire to clear the land of forests, cultivation of edible plants, and early management of barley and oats from 15,500 BC, almost 18,000 years before today. Okay, so that's how old agriculture is known to be in India. Did we have agriculture even before that? So you can check out this article. There's a lot of detail in this. Wonderful article, one of the best I've seen about the beginnings of agriculture in India. You can check this article out. So agriculture existed in the subcontinent at least 17,000 years before today. Where was that? Yeah, about 17,000 years before today. Did we have agriculture 40,000 years ago? I'm not sure. We haven't found evidence of that. We have evidence of agriculture 17,000 years ago, roughly, before today. Cities. What about cities? We had cities about 10,000, 11,000 years before today. We have evidence from the Gulf of Hambat archaeological complex and other places, such places in southern India as well, on the east coast. That dates back 10, 11, 12,000 years before today. Underwater, submerged cities. But 40,000 years ago, I'm not quite sure. All right. Yajnavalkya says, in 6,000 BC, were southern India, eastern India, and Tibet mostly inhabited by pre-agricultural hunter-gatherers devoid of cities? So it's kind of a continuation of the previous question. So like I showed just now, we had agriculture, the beginnings of agriculture in India, in the subcontinent, about roughly 17,000 years before today. You had management of barley and oats, cultivation of edible plants, and so on, about 17,000 years ago, before in present-day Sri Lanka, when it was connected to the Indian subcontinent, joined to the subcontinent. There was no gulf in between. So clearly, these were not hunter-gatherers that lived in the subcontinent at that time. 6,000 BC is pretty. I think the Rig Veda was probably written around that time, because that's when the Indian rainy season starts declining monotonically. and the Saraswati starts gradually shrinking as a river. Around 6000 BC is where this happens. So clearly, the Rig Veda was written closer to 6000 BC than to 1500 or 2000 BC. So we clearly were not a hunter-gatherer society at the time. We were a pretty advanced society. Now, what about, was ancient India of this time, 6000 BC, devoid of cities? So let's take a look at cities. Let's talk about cities. Let's go to Google, and what about ancient Indian cities from that time? So one piece of evidence is this. Let's go to Puhar, underwater. So check this out. The Hindu says ancient port. This is a report from 2023. Ancient port city of Pumpuhar traced under sea. A huge harbor, lighthouse, and settlements formed part of the port city. So this ancient city is buried under sea. It's not buried under sea, it's submerged under sea at a depth of about 50 to 100 meters, 30 to 40 kilometers off the coast of present-day Pumpuhar in Tamil Nadu. It's not far from Pondicherry, for example. Okay, so this dates back. How far it dates back? At least 10,000 years. Now, it doesn't say it here. Let's see here. Times of India. It may be over 15,000 years old. It's approximately 50 to 100 meters under the ocean. That's pretty deep. So maybe that it was the last time it was above water could have been at least 10,000 years ago. So very ancient city they have discovered. Okay. So yeah, it may also have been called Kaveri Pumpatnam. So very ancient city off the coast of the east coast of India, off the coast of Tamil Nadu. Now let's talk about the Khambat archaeological Gulf of Archaeology Complex. Okay, so this is discovered in the Gulf of Khambat. So you have another underwater city, okay, and it's not just one city; it's an entire complex network of cities that is about, I don't know how many meters underground, maybe 50 to 100, 30, 40 meters underground, about 20 kilometers from the Gujarat coast, and so on. So I'll not go into the details right now, but this also is at least about 10,000 years old, probably 11, 12,000 years old. So we had cities, an entire archaeological, entire complexes of cities, long before 6000 BC. And if you look at these cities that are underwater, especially in the Gulf of Khambat region, the Dwarka region, we have ancient Dwarka as well, we find that they are laid out like Harappan cities, grid, streets laid out in in a grid system, like what you have in Manhattan today, that sort of thing. But you had that 10,000 years before today, 11, 12,000 years before today. So that kind of tells you what kind of history India really had, and much of it is lost, and we need to start recovering that through archaeology. What else? So yeah, I hope that answers the question. One second, where are we? Here we are. Okay, next question is by Rajorshi Gon. The question is it possible for a kingdom or a country or an empire to be very strong and not have expansionist tendencies? Are you aware of any such rulers in history who became very powerful but never expanded beyond the borders they inherited? Interesting question. And yeah, so the point is this. There have been examples of kingdoms and empires that have not been expansionist. So one example I can think of is the Ming dynasty in China. So this was 1300s to about 1600s, okay, the Ming dynasty. And this is the dynasty that built the Wall of China, the Great Wall of China, or at least it aggressively expanded the Wall of China. I'm not sure who initially built the beginnings of the Great Wall of China, but the Ming dynasty, it rebuilt the Wall of China and fortified it considerably. So the Ming dynasty essentially was a successor of the Yuan dynasty, the dynasty of Shri Chinggis Khan, who had conquered China, and it was ruled by later. It was later ruled by Shri Kublai Khan. Uh, so the successor dynasty was the Ming dynasty, and they became quite powerful, but they never expanded. They fortified the wall of China and they rebuilt it. So they were kind of they did not want to expand. They wanted outsiders to stay out. So that's an example of a strong, a pretty powerful country or empire, because it was an empire, the Ming dynasty, which did not have expansionist tendencies. Isn't that interesting? Now, next to China, east of China, we have Japan. So Japan, for a long period of time, had this isolationist policy under the Tokugawa shogunate, which is 14th century to 19th century. And the Tokugawa shogunate ends with the Meiji Restoration, which totally transformed Japan. So during the Tokugawa shogunate, that period of time, Japan was quite powerful, but they prioritized internal order and peace and prosperity, and they did not want to interact with the outside world. So they closed off the country. They limited foreign influence as far as possible, foreign uh, contacts as far as possible, and Japan remained a closed country, kind of like, well, not like North Korea. It was very different, but yeah, closed off to the rest of the world, despite being a pretty powerful country militarily. So that's an example. I can give examples of the Byzantine Empire. Switzerland is an example. Switzerland, the Swiss Confederacy, 16th, 15th century onwards, was pretty strong for its well known for its military strength. Swiss mercenaries were highly sought after in Europe. So the Swiss had a strong military, but the Swiss focused on being defensive and they focused on being neutral. So the Swiss are renowned for being a neutral country. So the Swiss never ever thought about territorial expansion. So I'm sure there are more examples. I mean, we are an example, aren't we? I mean, when, let's say, Emperor Ashok conquered the whole subcontinent, he could have gone beyond the subcontinent. He certainly was powerful enough to do that. He was militarily really powerful, probably the most powerful military in the world at the time, during Ashok's time. But once he had the entire subcontinent under control, under his governance, he said that's enough for me. Now I'm going to focus on governance, and he did not expand beyond the subcontinent. So there are many examples like this, and there are many various reasons uh, why empires sometimes choose not to be expansionist. Multiple reasons. Each example I've given had different reasons. Probably the Ming dynasty, they were trying to they had these memories, very recent memories of the Mongol occupation, and they did not want to get entangled with foreigners again. So that's why, because of the trauma that China suffered under the Mongol occupation, maybe that's why they became defensive in nature despite being powerful militarily. The Japanese had probably a different set of reasons, and so on. Krishna Raghunath from the Surinamese Netherlands says, although Bangladesh and Pakistan differ a lot from India and Nepal on religious and political level, but there are cultural similarities such as language, music, dance, clothing, cuisine. What's my view on this? My view on this is very straightforward. We were those same people. If you subtract religion from East and West Pakistan, Bangladesh and Pakistan, then what's left? What's left is Indians. The same, they're the same people, right? If you take religion out of Bangladesh and Pakistan, it's the same people. They're just Indians. The same cuisine, the same clothing, the same taste in music, the same love for dancing, the same respect shown to elders. All the same things are there. The only difference today is religion. Afghanistan is slightly different. It was the first region of India to fall to the Turks, and Afghanistan's demographics have been re-engineered. But if you look at Pashtun culture, once again, it's just Indian culture. If you subtract religion, if you take religion out, they're also just like us. So not surprising at all. We are the same people genetically, but DNA doesn't matter. What really matters is culture. Okay, now let's take some geopolitics questions, shall we? Okay. All right. Okay. Yes. A very popular question. USAID. Kiran Malhotra, Pranay Paul, and Kiran Malhotra again. Donald Trump dismantled USAID. So, what could be the alternative to this? How do you view the USAID funding pause and outrage from its beneficiaries, with Trump and Musk portraying themselves as exposing and cleaning the system? Is it really a takedown, or have they already built something more powerful in house, perhaps AI, to replace it? Would they truly dismantle an asset like USAID without a larger strategy in pay? USAID was one of the most important things for the US power projection activities and to achieve various objectives. Now Trump has shut it down. What could be its alternative in the future? So would you, if you have this powerful tool at your disposal, would you dismantle it? Why would you do that? Yeah, you would do it only if it is not serving the purpose and it's actually harming you. That's the only reason why you would do such a thing. If it's a very powerful tool for your foreign policy, for fomenting unrest around the world, for destabilizing countries, for carrying out regime change, for spreading your culture and your values around the world, why would you dismantle it? Right? That's the question. So clearly, there's a reason why this was done, and probably it was not serving the purpose. Maybe it was harming. Maybe Trump's regime, or maybe the US in some way. So we know that USAID was a left-leaning organization. It had been taken over by lefties, which essentially means Democrats. And now the Republicans are in power. And this was completely run by the Democrats. That's what it looks like. Absolutely no conservatives or Republicans in USAID. So that's why Trump has dismantled it. Now, it's not like it's the only tool they have in their foreign policy toolkit for destabilizing countries and infiltrating countries and doing things like that. It's not the only tool they have. They have so many other such organizations. The National Endowment for Democracy. What a wonderful sounding name. That's another such organization they have for carrying out the same activities. Industrial scale Christian conversions and regime change operations and creating a class of traitors in a country who will work for the US against the interests of their own country, and so on. Infiltrating academia, all these things. So that's the National Endowment for Democracy. Then you have the Ford Foundation, you have the Rockefeller Foundation, you have George Soros and his entire bunch of things. You have Oxfam, and so much more. So they've got a whole array of other organizations that can do the same things. So they would not shoot themselves in the foot, would they, the Americans? No, there was a reason for this. So there'll be outrage from its beneficiaries and so on, but those beneficiaries that really matter to the US, they will be taken care of. Their funding and their whatever benefits they were getting from the US will be rerouted through some other organization. Okay. So USAID, the dismantling of USAID doesn't mean that US foreign policy is going to completely take a 180-degree U-turn. No, it doesn't mean that. It's just house cleaning. And it's about what they're doing is they're making the US governance and foreign policy or machinery, etc. They're making it leaner and meaner and much more effective. So they're going to cut out the bloat. They're getting rid of these useless organizations or counterproductive organizations. And they're going to then rechannel all those energies and everything else into other organizations. And it's going to get even more dangerous for the target nations. Vikram Geopolitical says, what effect will Trump shutting up US aid, what effect will it have on countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan? Will Trump support the Yunus regime the way Biden supported considering Yunus's history with Trump. Okay. Look, USAID is an organization, was an organization. It's been shut down. It's essentially been shuttered. So it's it's been shut off. The money that was flowing into all the countries has been shut down. Okay. Um, so US aid activities in all nations have been shut down, not just Bangladesh and Pakistan. The Indian media it reports things selectively. Oh, Trump has shut off aid to Bangladesh and Pakistan. That's not the case. He has shut off aid to everybody, which is flowing in through this one organization called USAID. It doesn't mean everything else will be shut down. So please, it doesn't mean it's only for Bangladesh and Pakistan. And he's a great friend of India. I don't know why the Indian media does this. To get views and clicks, you'll do anything, right? So the question is, what happens to Bangladesh and Pakistan now? Trump may not be a great fan of Yunus because Yunus was a Soros guy. He was a great friend of the Clintons and Obama, etc. The Obamas, I think it's the Obama regime that awarded him the Nobel Prize. The Nobel Prize is a reward given by the West to its nice little good boys and puppets and minions. The Nobel Peace Prize, at least. So it was given to him by the Obama regime. So he's a great friend of the Democrats. Yunus. I'm sure Trump won't like that very much. But having a puppet, a vassal in Bangladesh, is definitely great for the US because it gives them a great amount of leverage over us or India. The US can unleash mayhem in India, or at least try to do that in a variety of ways from Bangladesh. If you have an anti-India regime in Bangladesh, why would you give up an asset like that? Why would you undo what you spent so many years creating in Bangladesh? Why would you undo that? I don't see much of a change happening in Bangladesh. It all depends on how we deal with Mr. Trump, what we offer him, what he offers us in exchange, how we negotiate, and so on. But I don't see him getting rid of this great leverage he has. The same goes to Pakistan. So, if US aid has been shut down, that doesn't mean anything. They will, if they need to route money into Pakistan and Bangladesh, they can do it through 50 other organizations. So I don't see Trump being okay with Yunus being removed and let's say hypothetically Sheikh Hasina coming back. The Americans will not want that to happen. It's great to have multiple sources of leverage against a big country like us. So yeah, it makes as far as I can see, it's not going to make a huge difference. Pranay Paul says, with BBC Media Action admitting that 8% of its income came from from US government funding, how does this affect the perception of free press and media neutrality? Does the pause in US aid funding expose deeper dependencies, and could this reshape global media narratives? Okay, interesting wording. Yeah, so it's been revealed now. It's emerged now that BBC was getting 8% of its funding from US government, from US aid. So is anyone surprised? I've been saying this for years, I believe, that the UK is an American vassal. Ever since Tony Blair came to power as the Prime Minister of the UK has been America's pet poodle, right? So obviously they will fund their vassals. The BBC's talking points are nothing but American talking points. The BBC is an organ that furthers American foreign policy. So if they want to say bad things about India, for example, or China, and let's say they don't want to do it, the Americans don't want to do it themselves, they will ask the BBC to do it, or they'll ask some other media outlet in some other country to do it, or they will have 50 different media outlets in 50 different Western countries do that. And the BBC is this great old British institution, anti-beam they call it, right? It used to be great once, allegedly. Now it's a tool of US propaganda. So absolutely no surprise here at all, as far as I'm concerned. Perception of free press and media neutrality. There's no free press. There's no media neutrality. There's never been a neutral media. There's never been a free press. It's all paid press. This idea of the free press and a neutral media is the biggest illusion the West has created. There's no free press nowhere. There's no free press nowhere in the world, including back home in India. There's no free press. Everything is paid for. All right. Okay, next the question. Shubhankar Kulkarni and Mr. 88ers. Trump tweeted that the Gaza Strip would be handed over to the US by Israel at the conclusion of fighting, and Palestinians would be resettled somewhere else. So, where possibly could all the Palestinians in Gaza be resettled? It's not a small population. Isn't Trump paving the way for other countries to do something similar? Trump said the US will take over Gaza in Gaza. Do you think he will do that? He is literally inviting a war in the Middle East, and there's no way it's going to be a peaceful transition or relocation of Palestinians. How do you see this situation? So yeah, he tweeted that the Gaza Strip would be handed over to the US. It would be taken over by the US and redeveloped. And then later he also put out a statement that this will be done once Israel is done with the fighting and all that. So Israel has to properly bring peace in, pacify the region, sanitize the region, or whatever language you want to use. And once that is done, once peace prevails, America will step in and develop this piece of real estate, essentially. So the Gaza Strip is not a very small place. So let's go to the map and take a look at the Gaza Strip. Yes, where is Gaza? So we have to go to West Asia. We have to go to this tiny nation called Israel, and here we have Gaza. So it's not a very large piece of land. If you take a rough measurement, it's measure here from here. It's about 45 kilometers long and about 10, how many kilometers? 10 kilometers wide. Yeah. So it's about 500 square kilometers, which is not very small. It's not large either. So that's the Gaza Strip, the dimensions of the Gaza Strip. So what's gonna happen, and where will these people be resettled if they are going to be resettled? So I hear that there are multiple nations in West Asia that will be hosting refugees or migrants from Gaza. Egypt is one of the nations I hear is likely to do that. The UAE and various other nations from the Arabian Peninsula, and I also hear Indonesia is one of the possible destinations. So it looks like there are destinations for these people to go to. Not sure what the population of Gaza is. I'll not Google it right now, but yeah, so there are multiple destinations. Look, when the US says that you're going to do this, nations do it. So Indonesia is friendly with the US, let's say, okay, and the nations in the Arabian Peninsula will also do what the Americans tell them to do. So it's not going to be a problem to resettle these people. I don't think it's going to create a war in the Middle East. The only protests will come from fringe organizations. It'll come from Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, definitely, Russia and China as well. North Korea, sure, but not too many other nations will be willing to condemn what's being done. And I'm sure the people of Gaza, also the actual civilians, would be happy to move somewhere else. I'm pretty sure most of them would be happy to actually get a chance to live somewhere where there's not this constant warfare happening. What happens to Hamas? They are entrenched in Gaza, so I probably mean that would mean the end of Hamas eventually. So yeah, there could be a renewal in fighting and significant uptick in the intensity of fighting and hostilities before things settle down. So I don't think so. So yeah, there may be fighting. It may not be a very peaceful transition and relocation, but looks like the writing is on the wall. You may see a period of time where there's significant fighting in Gaza, because Hamas will not allow this to happen. They'll not just take it lying down. They'll fight. But I think the writing is on the wall. And once the people are relocated, the Americans will move into Gaza. They'll redevelop the whole place. So you may have casinos and Trump Taj Mahals and Mar-a-Lagos in Gaza. eventually. That's what could happen. So we already know that there are multiple countries that will be potentially hosting these people, and yeah, it won't be a very peaceful transition of handover, or the period before the handover, but it's not. It's certainly something the Israelis can get done. And now that Syria has fallen in the region, it's no longer um an Iranian ally or Russian ally. It's going to be much easier to take care of Hamas and Hezbollah for the Western forces, for Israel and the US. Okay, next question. Vikramaditya Rathore says, it seems the next 4 years will be more volatile than the last 4 or 5 years, 45 years, 4 to 5 years. Um, Trump has vowed to obliterate Iran if they build nukes, and so far he has failed to fulfill his promise of ending the Russia-Ukraine war. He said, I'll end it in one day, right? If the US manages to cause regime change in Iran, how will Russia and China react? Because it's the sole ally in the region, and that's not pro US in West Asia. Iran is the only ally that is left for Russia and China in West Asia. Only major ally, let's say. Pakistan is no longer a Chinese vassal. It's now a US vassal again after the 2022 regime change operation done by the US, the coup against Imran Khan. So Pakistan is now a US ally, US minion, and Iran is the only ally that Russia and China have. Now, let's imagine a hypothetical scenario in which there's war between Israel and Iran, or Israel plus US versus Iran. In the case of such a war, do you think the Chinese will intervene and come to the rescue of Iran? Not going to happen. Let's look at the map to understand the details. Where's the map? Let me put that on the screen. So as you can see on the map, see, Iran is west of India, west of Pakistan, Afghanistan, west of the subcontinent. As you can see, China is pretty far away. And between China and Iran, you have essentially US proxies, Afghanistan and Pakistan. Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan essentially are part of the Russian sphere of influence. So Russia is closer geographically to Iran than China. But in case there's a war between the US and Israel versus Iran, even Russia will not be in a position to intervene, because it would mean that Russia and the US are directly engaged in warfare, which is a situation nobody wants. So if Iran is faced with the prospect of war against Israel and the US, it's on its own. Russia and China may supply it with weapons and whatnot as far as they can, but they won't be able to come and intervene and send soldiers and troops and so on. So yeah, it's a dangerous period of time for Iran. And they are very worried about Israel. Israel has advanced aircraft. They're very worried about a decapitation strike that Israel could launch in Tehran. Out of nowhere, they appear and just wipe out the leadership in Tehran. End of story, regime change. And yeah, so I'm not sure if this would happen. I hope war doesn't happen. We don't want war, and we don't want a complete change in the balance of power in the region. But yeah, this is definitely a scenario that's possible. Yeah, Israel has always regarded Iran as a big danger to them, and it's possible that Iran may have made significant progress on the nuclear front. It's possible they may have 5 to 10 nuclear warheads by now. That's quite possible. And they have been making progress on the uranium enrichment front, and they have built facilities deep underground where it's difficult for bunker buster bombs to penetrate. So what Iran would need from its perspective, from the Tehran government's perspective, uh, the only thing that can ensure its survival is nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them. They can't deliver nuclear weapons to the US. Obviously, the US is too far away. The Iranians don't have ICBM technology, intercontinental ballistic missile technology, but they have very, very high quality cruise missiles and ballistic missiles that can reach Israel. And if they can guarantee that an Israeli strike will invite nuclear retaliation, then that can prevent war from happening. Uh, so maybe they have made some indications, the Iranians, that they have nuclear weapons. Maybe a couple of earthquakes that happened in northern Iran may have been artificial earthquakes caused by the detonation of a nuclear device. It's possible. And they have already demonstrated, the Iranians, that they can strike at Israel with large quantities of various kinds of missiles, including ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. They have hypersonic cruise missiles apparently, and ballistic missiles anyway, they re-enter at hypersonic or re-entry speeds. And a lot of those missiles that the Iranians fired at Israel earlier last year, they hit targets. And you just need a couple of those missiles to have nuclear warheads to cause tremendous damage. So the only thing that can save, that can guarantee peace from Iran's perspective is they having nuclear weapons, and they conveying to Tel Aviv that we'll use them if you try anything nasty against us. Obviously, this is a very dangerous scenario because the prospect of nuclear war is something nobody wants. So we in India, we don't have a horse in this race. We don't have a dog in this fight. What I would say is we need to emphasize and we need to exhort both nations to remain at peace. Don't go to war. So nobody should start a war. Don't do anything provocative. Vikram Geopolitical says Trump ordered to rescind sanction waiver on Chabahar port. This could impact the north-south international north-south transport corridor proposed by India. Trump wants to support the IMEC, India, Middle East, and Europe trade and transportation corridor instead, so that Israel can benefit from it. So yeah, his administration recently said that they are rescinding a sanctions waiver that the US had placed on the Chabahar port. So they have sanctioned Iran, etc., but they are not sanctioning the Chabahar port because India is using Chabahar. India is operating at least one terminal in the Chabahar port. But now the Trump administration says no more sanctions waivers for Chabahar. We're gonna sanction Chabahar. So it affects us now because we are operating Chabahar. Why are we operating Chabahar? Okay, let's go to the map. Once again, we need a map to understand what importance Chabahar holds for us, India. So here is the map of the region, and Chabahar is in Iranian Balochistan, not far from Gwadar. So this is Chabahar port. Let's zoom super deep. Let's put a satellite image on. This is on the Makran coast. And this is the town of Chabahar. And this is where you have the port. I think this is Chabahar port. And probably somewhere around here, we have India operating some part of this. Some part of this. Yeah, this is Chabahar port. Now, the reason this is important for us is that it allows us to have access to Central Asia via Iran. So when we have been supplying arms, weapon systems, etc., to Armenia. We have been doing that through Iran. So it goes probably to Chabahar from India, the weapon systems, and then they're transported by road through Iran and delivered to Armenia. That's what was happening. And Chabahar is important because that's how we are able to connect with Afghanistan. So we can have shipments shipped to Chabahar and then they're transported by road into Afghanistan because we lack direct access to Afghanistan and therefore Central Asia because Pakistan has cut that off from us. So now Trump says we're going to sanction Chabahar. So India can't use it anymore. So he's hurting India's interests. And he says, no, that's okay. You can't use Chabahar, but you can use this new thing which we'll construct in the next 10, 15 years, the IMEC. The IMEC doesn't exist. It exists only in paper thus far. And for it to be fully constructed will take at least a decade. So, and obviously that will go through Israel and it will go through other countries, which are all US allies. They will benefit from this. But for the next 10, 15 years, what do we do? Nothing, right? And yeah, so that's the deal. So this is another pressure tactic that Trump is applying on us because Mr. Modi is visiting the US in about 3 days. So Trump will have all these leverage points. We have the Yunus regime in Bangladesh that we can use against you. We have the Pakistani regime, which is our minion, our puppet, our vassal, which we can use against you. We are now sanctioning Chabahar. So that is something we are using against you. So we have all these pressure points and other things against you. And here are my demands for you. You got to do it for me, and then I will maybe give you something in return. That sort of thing. So it's a bargaining position that's been opened. Um, so yeah, that's nothing much India can do about this. The Americans will decide. The Americans are the all-powerful nation. There's nothing India can do about this right now, and that's okay. That's the way of the world. The Americans do much worse to their own allies in Western Europe, against the UK and all. I think we are still a sovereign nation, unlike the UK, unlike Germany, unlike all the EU or NATO nations. So we are in a better position, despite all this pressure that's been applied. And it's natural for a much more powerful nation to apply pressure in a variety of ways against nations that are less powerful. So that's the game. We've got to play the game, right? Vikram Geopolitics says this US regime, the Trump regime, will try its best to make India a vassal of the US. Don't you think it would be beneficial for India to become one? Interesting position. We have seen countries like Japan, South Korea, and some European nations developing and growing rapidly after coming under US occupation. We might not remain as sovereign as we are right now, but we can get US investments in tech, which would be beneficial for our economy. Interesting perspective and position. Interesting thought experiment and talking point. So yes, the Trump regime will try its best to make India a US vassal. Now, is it beneficial to be US vassal? And then let's take a look at some historical examples of bona fide, well-known, certified US vassals. Certified, stamped US vassals. One is Japan. Another is South Korea. A third is Germany, Deutschland. Uh, let's take these three examples. Let's take the UK also as an example. Okay, so we're taking four examples: Japan, South Korea, Germany, and the UK. Four nations that are US vassals. Four nations that have US military presence on top of them. Japan and South Korea completely, thoroughly penetrated by the US military. More than 100 military bases on each country. Permanent US military installations. There's a permanent US military presence in Germany as well as in the UK. All nations, all four, are under US military occupation. These are bona fide US vassals. Now, Japan did tremendously well after 1945, after it became a US vassal, after it came under US occupation. Tremendously well. Japan already had a great technological base, industrial base. That's how they were able to do so well in the Second World War. So they already had that, and that was then unleashed by the Americans. So Japan became a technological superpower, not military superpower, technological superpower, the most technologically advanced society on the planet. And they became a gigantic economy. By the 1980s, it was the second or third largest economy in the world, and they were on the way to become the biggest economy in the world. In the 1980s, they were threatening to become the largest economy and surpass the US in the 1980s. That's how far Japan had developed. And then the Americans, who controlled the Japanese government and military and economy, they made some tweaks via the Bank of Japan, and Japan went into a decline. And it is still in decline since the 1980s after the Plaza Accords. The economy is in a shambles. Japan is no longer a high income nation, it's now becoming a middle income nation. So that's what they did by tweaking, making a few tweaks to the economy. The Americans were able to ruin Japan. And that's not all. Look at the TFR in Japan, the demographic situation, the total fertility rate. It's one of the lowest in the world. A nation that prioritizes slave-like work. You are born to work and you will work your entire life. And the purpose of your existence is to work as hard as humanly possible. That's the kind of work culture you have in Japan, in South Korea as well. And South Korea, also the same thing. They also became a technological great power. A nation South Korea, that was under dictatorship for a long time after the Korean War. Even now, that's a different story. And even their economy is not doing great right now. And even their TFR is in a shambles, South Korea. Another thing about Japan and South Korea has been thoroughly Christianized by the Americans. Their indigenous culture has been eradicated, more or less. Japan, a lot of atheism, some Christianity. Lots of people call themselves atheists, and lots of what some people would call Western degeneracy has been introduced into their culture and society. Their traditional way of life has been wiped out in Japan also. You know, it still holds Japan still holds on to its culture in whatever ways it can, but yes, that damage has been done by the Americans to Japan by introducing Western degeneracy, atheism, and Christianity. Okay, by re-engineering the demographics, especially in South Korea, it's worked very well. So Japan's economy is in a shambles. Its demography is facing a disaster. Lots of people live their life alone, lonely, and yeah, there is that, and the same thing is happening to South Korea. When it comes to Germany, they are being deindustrialized. Uh, and Germany is seeing wave after wave of illegal infiltration and migration, all being engineered from Brussels, the EU capital. So Germany is being destroyed, okay, through immigration, through deindustrialization in two ways. So there is uh, no great economy in Germany. Used to be the economic motor that drove the European economy. No longer the case, and the demography is being destroyed through immigration. And the same thing you can say about the UK. The UK is the world's money laundering hub. London is the world's financial capital, the world's money laundering hub, and the UK is a poor nation attached to London, which is now being destroyed demographically through illegal immigration, legal immigration as well. Pakistani grooming gangs are creating mayhem in society. So if you become a US vassal, you will eventually be destroyed. I'm not saying the US is bad. I'm saying you become a vassal of any powerful nation. Eventually, they may decide to destroy you for their own purpose, for their own benefit. So for some time, maybe for a few decades, you will prosper. Your economy will do well. They will allow certain industries to flourish. And if you are a vassal of a powerful empire, your citizens are happy because they benefit from it. But the nation eventually gets destroyed. The culture gets eradicated. So do you think it's beneficial for India to have that? I think it's better to have a period of next 50 years of struggling alone, and building up our military and economic and technological might. Do that for the next 50 years. Don't complain every 2 years, nothing is happening. It's a slow process. But if you become a vassal of the great superpower of the empire, you will eventually be doomed. They will use you and then chew you up and throw you out. So, not a good idea. Okay? Pranay Paul says, how do you see PM Modi's upcoming US visit? What do you think is the significance of this trip, and what are the likely outcomes of his meeting with Trump? Look, Trump is in a hurry. And this is a completely different Donald Trump from what we saw from between 2016 and 2020. The first Trump 1.0 was a very different Trump. He was not allowed to do anything, not allowed to achieve any of his objectives. And he wasn't quite sure of his objectives as well. He wanted to build a wall with Mexico. He doesn't care about a wall today. Right now, he's in a tearing hurry to completely upend the entire world. And his objective is to be remembered as the biggest, baddest, greatest president of the US since George Washington. Okay? And he has the full might of the deep state right behind him this time. So he's in a hurry. He has completely reshaped the perception of Canada and Mexico in the relationship with these two countries. He's now focusing on Gaza, which he will deal with very quickly. He's talking about Greenland. He may get that. He's talking about the Panama Canal. He may get that. So these are the low-hanging fruits. Canada, push over. Like, he can deal with them any way he wants. Mexico, once again, there's nothing Mexico can do against the US, so he can deal with them. Gaza, easy to deal with from a US perspective. This is all low-hanging fruits for him. Then comes India. India is the world's fourth most powerful nation, number 4 in the world. India is a nation that is neither here nor there when we are talking about taking sides. We are neither in the Russia-China camp, we're neither in the Western camp. We are friendly with everybody. We have a multi-aligned foreign policy, multipolar foreign policy. Some would call it multi-aligned, some would call it non-aligned. I don't like this term non-alignment. I would say multi-alignment. Strategic autonomy is a term Indian analysts love to use. Whatever you want to call it. We have an independent foreign policy. That's what it means. And we're not taking sides with anybody. We want to deal with everybody in a friendly way. Now, when Mr. Modi visits Washington, D.C. in 3 days or so from now, Mr. Trump will be ready for him. So they meet and they have the customary hug. Then they go inside behind closed doors, and that's where the real game starts. And here's what Mr. Trump will tell Mr. Modi. Look, okay, I'll not try and speak like him because I can't do that, but he's gonna give a set of ultimatums. I need this from you. You need to decide right here, right now, today, not tomorrow, not next week. You've got to decide right here, right now. Are you with us or against us? If you are friends with China and Russia, you're against us. So you have to take a side. That's quite likely what will happen. So so what does that mean for us? If he gets everything he wants, it will mean that India will become a US ally. India will cut off relations with China and Russia and be completely pro-West. In an ideal scenario, he will even want US military bases on Indian territory. Now, he will come up with absurd demands to get what he really wants. You ask for 100 billion, and then when the person says no, you say, okay, instead of 100 billion, give me 100 million, that sort of thing. So you make an outrageous demand so that you can then later come down and ask for what you really want. And then the other side will be willing to give it to you. So he knows how to negotiate, how to bargain. He has a very distinctive style, the art of the deal. So look, we're going to be presented with a set of ultimatums. And when Trump gives you ultimatums, he can make good on those ultimatums and threats. So we can't say no. But what we can do is, yes, sir, of course, we'll do what you want. But here are the things we want, sir. Number 1, number 2, number 3, these things we also want. So we give you what you want. You please, sir, give us what we want. And he said, no, I can't do this. That's too much you're asking for. Then you negotiate and you bargain and you do that. And ideally, we get as much advantage as possible out of the entire thing. So what is it that we can ask for? We can say, sir, you are sanctioning Chabahar. Now we cannot access Central Asia because we cannot go against your sanctions. Sir, we need access to Central Asia. Please give us guaranteed access. We will do what you say. Right? So what is the meaning of guaranteed access to Central Asia? It means POK or Balochistan or something. Obviously, he won't give that. But then we can negotiate then about Chabahar. The other thing we can ask for is that, okay, sir, you are deporting Indian illegal immigrants to the US. We will take them back, of course. But sir, we will now do the same thing here. We will send back Bangladeshi migrants to Bangladesh. Sir, please don't make a big deal of it. We will take back all our illegal immigrants, and you allow us to send back the goddamn Bangladeshi infiltrators who are infesting India. And you allow us to do that. And please don't make your media do a hue and cry of this. That's another thing we can ask for. Third thing, please stop all this support for industrial scale Christian conversions in India. Your missionaries and all these organizations that are converting Indians on an industrial scale. Demographic re-engineering. Stop that, please. Another thing we can ask for is please end your support for Project K, the cookie terrorism in Manipur. Please stop funding the cookies. That's it. Then we'll deal with the rest. Once you stop funding them and supplying them arms, ammunition, all that, we'll quietly deal with them, with the illegal infiltrators. So there are things we can ask for in exchange for what they ask for us. Trump will obviously want India to become a US vassal. We can pretend to be a US vassal with certain red lines. One red line that cannot be crossed is no American military bases on American soil or on Indian soil. As long as that's not there, you are not really a vassal. But yeah, he may say that you have to buy our arms and ammunition and weapons. You have to buy the F-35. The more American weapon systems you buy, the more you get embroiled in infiltrated by them, because you have to open up your military to them. You have to sign various agreements and all. So it's going to be a process. But Trump will have certain ultimatums for us, for Mr. Modi. So Mr. Modi will obviously be prepared for this. He's a very smart man, and he will have to go back. He will have to go there prepared with a set of counter demands, and then let the negotiation begin. Let the game begin. And the two leaders, Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump, get along very well. So obviously, it will not be. It will be a pretty uh, cordial and polite negotiation. Um, of course, this is a very different Mr. Trump. It's not the old Mr. Trump. This is a very different beast. And you may be friends at a personal level, but this is between two countries. So he's not gonna, uh, you know, step back. So that's how it's going to be. I think, okay, I think the next 4 years is gonna see. In the next 4 years, we're gonna see the pinnacle of the India-US relationship, the best ever time we've had in the relationship between India and the US. All problems solved. Best relations. How good? Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump dancing together hand in hand. That's what I think will happen the next 4 years. We just need to play our cards right. Pranay Paul again, with China's Dubao 1.5 Pro outperforming major large language models on benchmarks and leveraging MOE architecture with 7 experts. How do you view this development in the global AI race? Could this shift the balance of AI leadership towards China? And what should India focus on to remain competitive in this evolving landscape? Okay, the new Chinese LLM is apparently outperforming major known LLMs on various benchmarks and so on. Yeah. Does it mean that the balance of AI leadership has shifted towards China? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The US is the undisputed leader in AI. Okay. I don't know what is the most powerful AI system right now in the world. It's some version of Chat GPT, I suppose. Now AI is branching out into various domains. Certain AI systems are the best at coding. Other AI systems are the best at other tasks and so on. I think the most powerful system out there right now is Deep Research or something by Chat GPT, by OpenAI. That's the American, in the American scheme of things. But apparently, the Chinese thing is outperforming these LLMs. Does it mean the Chinese have stolen a march on the Americans? Absolutely not. Why do I say absolutely not? Because what you are seeing in the US scene, these various systems that are out in the public domain, that's merely the tip of the iceberg. The real, what's really happening is all behind closed doors. It's all happening in secrecy. I can assure you they have already achieved AGI, artificial general intelligence. And the moment they achieve ASI, it's going to be game over. The models that they have, which have not been revealed to the public, are going to be orders of magnitude more powerful than whatever the best model is out there right now. And the Americans have poured hundreds of billions of dollars into this, and there's another $500 billion coming in. The Chinese haven't done that, as far as we know. China is doing well in AI, no doubt, but I assure you the Americans are way ahead of China. What should India do on this, about this, to remain competitive? No, first of all, start competing. It's not about remaining competitive. It's about, first of all, let's try to compete. Let's start something. Let's build an AI. So yeah, the government has announced that we are going to have our own large language model by the end of this year. Good. So yeah, that's a deal. Okay. Chavda supremacy in Devashish Kashyap. Why don't we have our own large language model LLM yet, despite having significant IT talent and India rising as a global semiconductor market? What do you think of India's AI mission? Can India build a large language model in a year? Also, the government has allocated highest money this year for private sector-led research. So why don't we have an AI system, a large language model yet? It's because our private sector, despite having money and resources and all that, they focus on short-term issues and profits and all that. They don't think strategically. They don't think from a geopolitical perspective. Look, in an ideal world, your entrepreneurs, your business people, etc., especially in the tech domain, should focus on research. I mean, should focus on research. First of all, we don't focus on research. We focus on building solutions and providing services. So if you have chat gpt, we'll build a chat gpt wrapper which uses the chat gpt llm to provide certain outcomes for the end user. So quick, you can make quick money from that. You can have a bunch of coders, programmers, 5, 10, 20 people who do it in a few days, test it and deploy it rapidly, and put out an app somewhere, and then you make money out of it. So it's all about short termism. In an ideal world, you want people not just to your entrepreneurs, your businesses, your business people, to not just focus on short term, on making money short term, but on investing in resources and research, R&D, fundamental R&D. But that's never been the approach in India, because of the kind of culture that's come into India from the 1980s onwards, of simply delivering services and doing arbitrage, labor arbitrage, and so on. So the entire Indian IT sector, because of historical reasons, has focused only on providing services and providing solutions and making money in the short term. You've never had this long-term, hard-headed strategic approach. Never had that. So that's why nobody has invested in this. So that's why we don't have any AI system or large language model, despite having, as we know, one of the biggest IT talent pools in the world, and we're also rising as a global semiconductor market. That's not something that correlates. But yeah. Now, what do I think of India's AI mission? So the government of India has announced an AI mission, and it's said, Mr. Ashwini Vaishnav, the Minister of IT, I think, has said that we're going to have our own LLM, large language model, by the end of this year, and we have allocated some money for that. I think it's very feasible for India to have a large language model of its own by the end of the year. One of the simplest shortcuts is to take an open source model like DeepSeek R1 or something. It's entirely open source. Take it, tweak it, and deploy your own model. But the problem with that is that we don't know what kind of data DeepSeek R1 has been trained on. You can tweak the weights and things like that, but ideally, what you want is to have your own system, developed from scratch, and you feed it. You train it on your own data set. That's what you ideally want. So all you need for what you need to build an AI model, a large language model, is well known today. You get a bunch of bright young kids between the ages of 18 to 25. Get 20 of them, or 40 of them, or 50 of them. Maybe 20 is enough. You give them a salary of 1 crore a month, and you put them in a building. You say that you get a salary of 1 crore a month, but you gotta stay in the building until this is done. I assure you, within 6 months maximum, you will have a high quality LLM AI system. You're gonna have that. It's easy. You have to give them a salary that tremendously incentivizes them, and you have to give them all the hardware they need, which is the GPUs and all that, whatever it costs. It won't cost a lot. So it's eminently feasible for us to do that. But you have to hire the best talent. You need to do that. You need to get the brightest people. So here's a problem that I am hearing about. I'm not sure how true this is. I'm not sure what the source of this information is, but this is what somebody has tweeted. A person called Sayak Paul. He has tweeted this to Mr. Ashwini Vaishnav. Why are you recruiting folks who don't have a solid technical know-how of AI systems and how they are built at a large scale? Stop going only via academic affiliation and look at the actual hands-on stuff, core contributions to good libs, knowledge across the AI spectrum, etc. This is, I don't know how true this is, but I would not be surprised if this is the direction in which we are going. Our bureaucrats, our babus, they only look at academic affiliation and all the status stuff. They don't look at actual ability. That's always been the thing that plagues India. We look at what degree you have and from where you got the degree and what your grades were. But what actual skills do you have? What experience do you have? What have you built thus far? That's what you've got to look at. Forget about the degree. What has the person built thus far? Then what skills does the person have? Forget about how old or young the person is, and forget about what degree they may or may not have. You've got to find the best talent, and the best way to find the best talent is to look at what they've already done, what they've already built, what kind of portfolio do they have, what kind of track record do they have. Look at their GitHub repository, what they've done on GitHub. It will all be there. So that's what we need to do. We need to have people in the AI mission who actually understand, who are technical people, not bureaucratic people. If you stuff it full of bureaucrats, you're going to go in the wrong direction. I'm not saying bureaucrats are bad people. You need domain experts and subject matter experts who are handling the whole thing top to bottom. And when they ask the ministry for X amount of money, that should be given to them, no questions asked. Don't have a whole hierarchical structure of 50 different bureaucrats running the show. That's the worst possible way to start this mission. Now, I have a different suggestion. This AI mission is well and good, and they have that the government is running the whole thing itself. Great, wonderful. We have IITs and NITs across the country, right? Choose the top 10 IITs, let's say. Okay, plenty of technical kids over there. Let's run a yearly competition between the IITs. Who develops the best LLM, the most powerful, most capable LLM? Give each IIT X amount of money. One chunk of the money is all about the hardware. You need so many GPUs on all the hardware on which to run the LLM. And whatever other money is required, give it to each IIT, the top 10 IITs, and let them build their own team of people who will work on this problem for 1 year and hold a competition between the IITs. And the one that wins, give them a big cash prize, 10 crores, whatever. It's peanuts for the government of India, 10 crores, nothing. It's small change. It's pennies for them. So have a competition and do this on a yearly basis. And each year the IIT needs to build upon its success or whatever the lessons they've learned. In 5-10 years, we're going to have a thriving AI what do you call it? Ecosystem. I mean, is this so hard to do? So I hope we do some of these things. So I think it's eminently feasible for India to have, in a very short time, high quality AI systems, high quality large learning models and whatnot. Very, very feasible for us to have it. I am tremendously optimistic we can do it, as long as the leadership gets the basics right. All right. Okay, Indian stock picker says our external affairs minister Dr. Jaishankar was given a front row seat. Fantastic during Trump's swearing-in ceremony. But later on, in spite of inviting Modi ji this early to the US, how should we see this aggressive Trump speeches in deporting 100+ Indians like criminals? Hands and feet chained, and silence from our side. No condemning the way of deportation, but EAM repeatedly said this is routine procedure of deportation. No change from past episodes. How do we see this aggression from US side, and etc. And weak response from our side. So you were saying that these people were deported, 100+ Indians were deported like criminals, hands and feet chained. Excuse me, they are criminals. These people are criminals. There are various categories of criminals, and there are various categories of crimes. There are non-violent crimes. So a criminal is not necessarily a murderer or a burglar or something like, or somebody who does various kinds of violence. That's not the only types of criminal we have. Entering a country illegally is a crime. Aren't we sick and tired of the millions of illegal Bangladeshi infiltrators in India? Aren't they all committing a crime by entering and residing in India illegally? That's a crime, isn't it? So if these Indians entered the US illegally, they are criminals. And then the country, the US, whose laws they have broken and whose territory they are residing, that country will deal with them according to their own legal system and their own ways of doing things. Why should we complain? These illegal infiltrators into the US of Indian origin, they have shamed our country. They deserve to be brought back in chains. Why are people getting upset? I don't get it. I would like to see Bangladeshis deported from India. I'm not saying treat them badly or whatever. Get rid of them, right? They are all criminals. Entering a country illegally is a crime. I don't understand why Indians are all upset about this thing. They're criminals. And apparently there are many more such individuals in the US. So let's not be emotional. Let's be factual. Criminals will be treated like criminals. Don't be a criminal. Don't do crimes, and then you'll be treated well with respect. So I don't see any problem in this. Hedgehog's Dilemma says Elon Musk has rehired an employee who openly promoted racism with statements like normalize Indian hate. In JD Vance, the vice president of the US, who has an Indian origin wife, he has also backed this individual despite the lack of any apology. What does this indicate about the perception of Indians among such influential figures, and how should Indians respond to such attitudes? So first of all, yeah, this individual, this person who was in the Department of Governmental Efficiency, DOGE, he had tweeted things like normalize Indian hate and so on. Okay, and he was fired because of that, but Elon Musk is now rehiring him. And JD Vance, the vice president, has supported this. He said that, look, it's a mistake. It's a kid. Everybody makes some statements that are stupid, and then later on they don't agree with those statements because they've grown. So I don't see a problem with that. That's what JD Vance says, despite having an Indian wife and kids, half Indian kids. Now imagine this scenario. Imagine this hypothetical scenario in which an Indian person makes a statement, hypothetical scenario, hypothetical statement, normalize American hate, or normalize hate against X religion or Y religion. Okay? Imagine this happens. And then the Indian government hires this person. How will the Western media react? How will the US government react? They will unleash their media against us like a pack of rabies infested dogs. Won't they? We have seen this in the past. If something like this happens in India, we will be demonized for weeks. And then we will, that sort of thing will happen. But if they do it, then it's perfectly fine. So these people are politicians. Elon Musk is also a de facto politician now. And he actually has the benefit. So, and JD Vance is an astute politician. It's now apparent. It's now obvious he's an astute politician. When when the Republicans went after Vivek Ramaswamy because he made a statement saying that Americans need to have higher standards. When the Republicans went after Vivek, he was demonized and he was thrown out of DOGE. JD Vance kept quiet. Despite Ramaswamy making a good point, JD Vance did not come to his support of his friend. Now there is this anti-India hatred all over the place in the US, anti-Indian hatred. And then Musk rehires this person who said normalize Indian hate. JD Vance goes out and says, I am okay with this. I support this. Don't make a big deal of this. So he is playing to the gallery. He knows where the sentiment of his voter base lies, and he's making sure that he doesn't alienate them. Despite having a wife who is of Indian origin and kids who are half Indian. So, yeah, that's JD Vance. He has acted like a coward, essentially. It's a cowardly thing that he has done. But what does it indicate about the perception of Indians in the US? It tells you, my dear friends, that Indians, despite, even though a person may have an American passport, if you are Indian, if you are brown skinned, especially Indian, especially Hindu, then you are a second class citizen in the US. So ideally, you should come back to India and build this country. And I would appeal to our honorable Prime Minister Shri Modi ji, to make India a place that welcomes people back and treats them well and gives them every potential, every possible opportunity to succeed. That's what I would request the Prime Minister of India to please do. I know you're already working very hard in this direction. Please, even more, please. Prakhar Gupta says China has now developed a sixth generation fighter jets for its defense, while India is still struggling to develop a fifth generation fighter plane. Should India now focus on developing indigenous made in Bharat fighter jets at a fast pace? Or should we buy new generation fighter planes from other countries like Russia in the current situation? A brief answer I'll give you. We should do two things in parallel. First of all, keep developing jet engine technology of our own and keep developing the fifth generation fighter plane that we are developing, AMCA. That's the first thing we should do. In parallel with that, we should also try and purchase jet engine technology from a friendly-ish nation, whether it's France, whether it's Russia, whoever. We don't need to have the best jet engine technology in the world. We need to have good enough jet engine technology. It doesn't have to be the best in the world. The Russian Saturn engine that powers the Sukhoi 30 MKI think that's good enough. If you can get that jet engine technology and you are able to build it entirely in India, game changer. So that, and purchase something like the Sukhoi 57 or whatever, but also get a full transfer of technology and pay for the transfer of technology. Pay whatever they ask for. Just get it. So then we can keep developing our own systems and also have in-house production of these systems. That's what we need to do in parallel. But if we acquire the technology for a jet engine and for the Sukhoi 57 or whatever, it doesn't mean we should abandon our technological development, which we're already doing for many years. Have both happen in parallel. But it's high time something is done about this issue. And of course, these days jet engines, I mean fighter planes, fifth, sixth generation fighter planes are important. But we also need to, in parallel, develop other systems like drones, loitering weapons, and much more. Drones are the future of warfare, actually. Drones and robotics. Geopolitical Dubey says, can France become the next Russia for India? Can Bharat trust a colonial power like France? Look, France would love to have a fully independent foreign policy. France would love to partner with a nation like Bharat in a mutually beneficial way. France would love to genuinely be independent and sovereign, which it is not, because it's a member of both NATO and the EU. So as long as France is a member of NATO plus EU, it's difficult for them to truly partner with India. I don't care if it's a former colonial power and all. Every nation has done good things and bad things. That's no big deal. Let's not look at things from a moralistic perspective. Let's look at it from a practical and pragmatic perspective. What can they offer us? If they can offer us jet engine technology, we can purchase that. They'll ask for a high price. Let's pay it. So it's that sort of relationship. But we have good relations with France. We have a convergence, commonality of interests in the Indian Ocean region. They have territories there. We for us, it's the home ocean, so it's important for us. And there's so much more strategically that completely converges when it comes to France and India. The only issue is that France is a member of NATO plus EU, which means that they are under US influence. They don't see the US as a friendly nation, by the way, but that's the constraint that they operate under. But yes, if we take things in the right direction, it can certainly be a very beneficial and very positive relationship for both nations. France won't be another Russia for us. Russia was our former vassal. Overlord. We were their vassal in the 1900s, but they were not an evil overlord. They did not try to destroy our society and culture and all. So that won't be the same kind of relationship that we will have with France, but it can definitely be a great partnership if things are done right. Aniket says the Indian Navy now wants to focus on submarines rather than white elephant aircraft carriers. What is my take? I say, thank God. Thank God sense has finally prevailed. How many times have I said we need to stop focusing on aircraft carriers? We need to have more submarines. I've been saying this for 3-4 years now, at least, over here in public. I've always advocated more submarines. We already have X number of aircraft carriers, 2 of them. We don't want or need a third one. Why do we not want more aircraft carriers? An aircraft carrier is the is the principal naval ship of the 20th century. We are in the 21st century. The deadliest naval asset in the world today, in the 21st century, in the context of 21st century warfare, is the submarine. The stealthiest asset you can have. And you want distributed lethality. This is a principal, basic, fundamental concept of any kind of warfare. You want to distribute your lethality over as much territory and over as many platforms as possible. Don't concentrate your lethality on in one big platform, because that can be easily wiped out. It's a numerical game to destroy an aircraft carrier. It's just a mathematical certainty that if you fire enough missiles, then you will overwhelm the defenses and you will destroy it. And there are nations that can do that. Even we can do that. So aircraft carriers are, it's a nice prestige item to have. And I'm sure lots of naval officers would love to serve on something like an aircraft carrier. But you have to be practical national interest over goddamn prestige. We need to have lots of submarines, as many as possible. I would say 50 to 100, between 50 and 100. I know it's a tremendously tall number I'm saying here, but yeah, have you seen the size of the coast that we are defending and the size of the maritime real estate we claim is our strategic backyard? We need a lot of submarines. We also need to invest in missile boats for defensive purposes rather than offensive purposes. And defense can be very rapidly turned into offense. Imagine a missile boat, a small ship that, let's say, carries 3 BrahMos's. And if you have 100 missile boats, that's 300 BrahMos missiles. That is a frightening prospect for anybody. And that costs next to nothing compared to large warships. So there's so much you can do if you think creatively. But coming back to the question, I'm very glad that some sanity and some sense has finally prevailed. And we are now going to focus on submarines. So what we need is lots of submarines. Quantity has a quality of its own. Instead of buying a small number of very expensive submarines, we should buy a large number or build a large number of relatively inexpensive submarine. For example, the Swedish Gotland class submarine. Let's Google that. Gotland class submarine. Let's go to Google. Let's go to Gotland class submarine. So this is the Swedish Gotland class submarine. This is one of the deadliest submarines in the world, and it costs $100 million a piece. I assure you, $100 million for a submarine is peanuts. This thing is deadly. Okay, so if you're going to be a US vassal of sorts, we can negotiate the sale of the entire company to India. We will buy the entire company, the Gotland class submarine, the parent company will buy it and we'll move it to India, whatever it costs. How about that? And then we can mass produce these submarines like sausages, like samosas. Why not? So instead of having a submarine that costs $1 billion to build, let's have 10 submarines, each of which costs $100 million. So we have to be creative. We have to look at various solutions. And you may ask me, what's the evidence that this submarine costs $100 million only? That's homework for you. Go find out how I know that this submarine costs only $100 million a piece. Homework for you. Next question. Vikramaditya Rathore says, how might the moon and Mars colonization projects affect sovereignty and jurisdictional debates in space? Jurisdictional debates are pointless. Who cares about debates? What matters is not a debate. What matters is the possession of territory. What matters is the creation of facts on the ground. To hell with people's debates. Go debate all day, all night. Go debate for 10 years. Who cares? What matters is creating facts on the ground. What matters is the possession of territory. So, yeah, it will affect sovereignty. Whoever sets foot first on Mars and creates the first Mars base will own a chunk of a foreign of a celestial object in the solar system apart from Earth. And I'm pretty sure Elon Musk will be the first king of Mars if he's the first to reach there. He has said that he intends to die on Mars, which means that he wants to settle down there on Mars. So I'm pretty sure if he succeeds in his endeavors, then he will be the first king of Mars. And once you establish a colony, a self-sustaining territory there, you can actually declare independence from Earth if you want to, as long as the colony is self-sustaining. Eventually, it will not be possible for long, but yeah, then you will have a situation like you had between between England and the American colonies. So yeah, questions of sovereignty, etc., will arise, and you may have declarations of independence from the moon. Moon will be difficult because we can reach the moon pretty quickly from Earth, less than a week's time. Mars is a difficult story. The Mars is a whole different story. But these debates, no one cares about debates. What matters is what facts are created on the ground, and you create facts on the ground by creating, by possessing, and by claiming and possessing territory on the ground. Okay, Kusal Khandal says, what are your views on physics research on density functional theory? I worked as an undergraduate research assistant in El Paso, Texas, on DFT. I am back to my country, Bhutan, now, as I've completed my studies, and I'm wondering if I should continue doing research in DFT or shift my focus on string theory, as you suggested. I suggested that you should focus on string theory. I'm not sure where you heard that, or who made you believe that I say that people should focus on string theory. I am the last person to say that anyone should focus on string theory. I am one of the harshest critics of string theory you will find anywhere in the world. String theory has proven to be a colossal waste of monumental amounts of time and funding. String theory is a whole gigantic exercise in tremendous amounts of mathematics. What's the outcome of string theory? Nothing. Zero. Nada. What has string theory produced? Nothing. It's produced new kinds of mathematics. Good new mathematical techniques and all that. Wonderful. But what has it achieved for us in our quest to understand the universe better? Nothing whatsoever. It has made no testable predictions. Not one. String theory has been a waste of time. But it's somehow overhyped. And it's something that people find fascinating. And all the funding in the US goes to string theory. If you want to get a PhD in theoretical physics, 9 times out of 10, you will have to do it in string theory. Otherwise, you will be marginalized. You won't get a PhD. So here's a good cartoon. Look at that. Everyone wants to get into string theory, but it does nothing for physics in the real world. You want to do something that has applications in the real world if you want to be a productive member of society, somebody who contributes something of value to society. So I think the answer should be very straightforward. You should focus, should continue focusing on DFT, right? So what is DFT? DFT is applied quantum mechanics. It's density functional theory. A functional is a function of a function. It's a function that takes a function as an input and outputs a real number of coins. So this is applied quantum mechanics. With DFT, you investigate the electronic structure of many body systems like atoms, molecules, condensed matter, and you can study essentially mainly ground state properties of various condensed matter systems. And DFT has applications in the real world, broad applications in things like chemistry, material science, in nanotechnology, drug discovery, and all. And with the advent of machine learning and AI, DFT becomes even more powerful, and you can make a lot of real world difference in the real world if you focus on DFT instead of focusing on string theory. So my recommendation, my suggestion is, please don't move your focus to string theory. Keep on doing research in DFT. All the best, sir. Pranay Paul says, Narayana Murthy says, it's not ideal to follow nationalism in today's interconnected world. In a time when global powers prioritize their own national interests, he wants India to not follow nationalism. So on whose behalf is he really batting? What could be the underlying motive behind such a statement? Mr. Narayan Murthy is a problematic individual. I'll tell you that. He has a long track record of funding activities that are, if not anti-India as a nation, definitely anti-Indian civilization. So I'll put let me put up this change.org petition that dates back from to the last decade, about almost a decade ago. The petition to remove Sheldon Pollock as mentor and chief editor of the Murthy Classical Library. So Narayan Murthy's son, he was studying in the US, and his guide or whatever was this guy Sheldon Pollock, who is a known Hindu phobe. Okay, and he wanted to gain funding for translating various ancient Indian texts into English, Sanskrit and other languages, Sanskrit, Telugu, Tamil, whatnot. So Pollock wanted funding to do this, and the Murthis gave him the funding. Uh, so this project should be guided would have to be guided and carried out by a team of scholars who have not only proven mastery in the relevant Indian languages, but are also deeply rooted and steeped in the intellectual traditions of India. And Pollock is not that sort of guy. It is well known that he has deep antipathy towards many of the ideals and values cherished and practiced in our civilization. He echoes the views of Macaulay and Max Weber that the Shastras generated in India serve no contemporary purpose except for the study of how Indians express themselves. Um, there is that. And uh, Pollock is a prominent signatory of two recent statements released by US academicians condemning the actions of the JNU authorities and the government of India against separatist groups who are calling for the independence of Kashmir and for India's breakup. Bharat tere tukde tukde honge, that sort of thing. Sheldon Pollock supports that, and he is funded by the Murthis. And he is a known Hinduphobe. He is known to be a person who distorts the meanings of texts in his translations in very subtle ways. So that's the kind of anti-India, virulent India hater that the Murthis have been supporting. And now he has been removed for whatever reasons after many years of serving as as a mentor and chief editor of this Murthy Classical Library. That's just one example of the activities of the Murthis. Now, what I've shown you, you can look it up for yourself. They have indeed, Narayan Murthy has definitely funded Sheldon Pollock, and Sheldon Pollock is definitely supported anti-India activities. These are facts that you can check on your own. I'm not making hypothetical claims and allegations. These are facts. So my question is, who is Mr. Narayan Murthy batting for? On whose behalf? Definitely, larger interests are there out there. Probably, look, everything it does, it kind of aligns and dovetails with the US agenda for India or against India. So clearly, it looks like he's batting for the US, for the West, against us. And he has said it openly that he was a leftist as a younger person. And he also wants Indians to work 80 hours a week, 100 hours. I'm not sure what number he said. That essentially will ensure that India's TFR drops below any sustainable number. Because when you are overworked and overwhelmed with stress, you cannot procreate. That's what history tells you over and over again. See what Christopher Columbus did to Hispaniola, to the Arawak Indians. He overworked the hell out of them, and they stopped reproducing. And soon enough, there was complete demographic collapse, and they were eradicated out of existence, the Arawak Indians, by Christopher Columbus, a genocidal monster. So if you overwork an entire society, the TFR declines drastically and the society collapses. So that's what Mr. Murthy advocates. It's okay for, let's say, the top 1% in society to work 80 hours a week for a certain period of time, for 2 years, 3 years, when you're pursuing a certain set of goals. But you can't do that for the rest of your life. I would say if the ordinary Indian adult works 40 hours a week effectively, India will be totally transformed. Okay. So Mr. Murthy, I don't know what agenda he has, but he definitely seems to have ulterior motives, and he has a track record of supporting and funding with his own money anti-India elements. This is a fact. Kalpana Khimka says, Namaste. How should a class 10th child like my child, how should that child study science when he has zero interest in it? You always encourage people to learn science. He says he doesn't want to study because it's pointless. I do encourage people to learn science, yes, But I know that some people don't like science and they can't stand science. So you cannot force science on everybody. You can't. Just like you cannot force arts on everybody. Some people just can't do arts, right? So my point is, it's not for everybody. And if a kid has zero interest, like you say, and you are the mother, so you will know very well, then please don't force science on the kid. Just ensure that he or she, um it's a he, just ensure that he just studies enough to pass the exam or whatever it is, and then let him go into whatever field he prefers, arts or commerce or whatever. Science is not for everyone. I would love for everyone to be uh, decently good at science, but it's not for everyone. So please don't force your kid. It's going to be counterproductive. Don't do that. All right, all the best. John Cena says, "What advice would you give? Can you give to a 25-year-old guy who is now broke? He has dreamed of becoming an entrepreneur since his 20s, but since he was 20, but because of family conditions and other reasons, he procrastinated. He completed engineering and computer science, good, and worked at IT job for 2 years. Then he took a risk at 24 and left his job to start his own startup. And now he has lost all his savings and is feeling depressed. First thing I would say, first thing, never feel sorry for yourself and waste time crying tears for how terrible your situation is. Eh, it's for losers. Get the hell up. Get up on your feet. Second, you have certain assets that very few people have. You have skills in computer science. You have experience in IT. These are valuable assets. Okay, you took a risk and you failed in your startup. Boo hoo. So what? Does it mean you're a bad person? Does it mean you're a failure? You're 25. You're just starting off in life. Reframe your mindset, reframe your orientation, reframe your worldview. You don't succeed before you fail multiple times. It's a very small minority of people who succeed right from the beginning. To really succeed in life, you have to have failed over and over again. Look at the biography of any great person. More failures than success. So stop feeling sorry for yourself in case you're feeling that way. You're feeling depressed, which means you're feeling sorry. Enough of that. Get get up on your feet. Okay, you broke. So the first thing you need is money. So go apply for jobs. Spend a couple of years more working, saving money, and then in the meanwhile, try and analyze what contributed to the failure of your startup. Learn the lessons from it, and then once you are in a better place mentally and financially, you can try that again, or try a different kind of startup, or try a different venture, or maybe spend a few more years working, getting a salary and saving. Look, the future is open. All possibilities are open for you. My advice is, be positive. Don't waste time feeling sorry for yourself. Depression, what cures depression? You get out of your house. You stay indoors in your room, you're going to be depressed. Get the hell out of the house. Go for a 1 hour walk somewhere. Go in the forest, go on the streets, wherever. Go walk, think, look around. Activity destroys depression. Movement destroys depression. So be positive. You have valuable assets. You have skills, you have experience. Leverage that. Go apply for jobs again. You will get a job somewhere or the other. Spend some years, spend some time earning money again, and then everything is fine. Then you can stay in a job, or you can maybe start a new startup if you want. Everything's possible. But don't waste your time feeling sorry for yourself. Take action. Get going. Get moving. All right, sir. All the best. Okay, let's take some questions from the live chat, shall we? Uh, Pranjal Tripathi says, "This is not live, it's just a recording." If it's a recording, how am I reacting to what, what you're saying here, bro? Is not recording, is very much alive. Yes, sir. All right. All right. Now let's take some questions. Uh, yes. Daivik Shriyan says, Manipur CM Mr. Biren Singh has just resigned. What can I make from this? It's too early to say anything. It happened a couple of hours ago, probably. It happened earlier today, right? The resignation of Mr. Biren Singh. So I don't know what to make from it. I think he was in Delhi yesterday. He met with Mr. Amit Shah, and today he has resigned. So the next phase of the situation in Manipur evolves now. I don't know. It's too early for me to react to anything. We'll have to wait and watch. what happens now? Is the BJP going to impose president's rule in a state it itself governs, or are they going to appoint a new chief minister? If there's going to be a new chief minister, who is it going to be? And then what are the new policies that are going to be implemented, if any? All that we have to see. So let's wait and watch. It's too early to give a knee-jerk reaction. But yeah, interesting development that is happening. Okay. Let's take few more questions. Mr. Longstrong says, how do we overcome this north versus south divide for good? Well, I have certain radical steps that I can propose, but I will not do that because one doesn't say such things. The thing is this. Look, who is creating this north-south divide? The people haven't created this divide. It is the politicians and some politicians who are doing it. They have created this divide for their own benefit. Just like this caste divide. It is the politicians who have imposed caste on India. They force you to have caste on all your certificates, your birth certificate, your school certificate, and so on and so forth. All government documents. Caste has to be there. Remove it. Caste is over. We were never this sort of society. The government has ensured caste has become a thing, a real thing. And similarly, this north-south divide or whatever east-west divide, it's politicians who do it. They want to keep you divided so that they can keep reaping benefits from that electorally. So what needs to be done? In a democratic system, you will have to tolerate such nonsense. So we need a better system. We need a better system, a better political system for India, which is more suited to the kind of entity the Indian civilization state is. The problem is certain politicians and certain political parties. I'm not naming anybody, but that is the problem. So the solution then becomes self-apparent that once we don't have such politicians and political entities on the scene, then these divides will eventually slowly disappear. So for that to happen, we need a different political system, a more centralized, let's say a presidential system, and maybe a different constitution, maybe a different set of laws. Big ask. Sid says, should the PM ask for access to advanced NVIDIA AI chips and some tech sharing? US has placed some restrictions on India due to Biden's CHIPS Act, I guess. Well, we can ask for it. Will they give it is a different story. I mean, you ask them for the keys to the kingdom, will they give it? There'll be some technology they will never share with anybody. Okay? But yes, there's no harm in asking for it. No harm at all. Trupti Patil says that I am not human, I'm just a robot. No, ma'am, I'm an AI. Not an AI, alien. Vikram Geopolitics says, why did the US discontinue the F22 Raptor? In my view, it's superior to the F-35. In my view also, the F-22 is the best aircraft ever built. Probably one of the best aircrafts ever built. Definitely the best aircraft the Americans have. It's definitely superior to the F-35. I have no idea why they've discontinued it. No idea. It makes no sense for them to discontinue an aircraft of that caliber and that good an aircraft. Doesn't make sense. Maybe they are continuing to build it in secret. I'm not sure. Doesn't make sense to discontinue the best thing you've built. Abhinav Bagalkot says, how come Nordic nations are number one in happiness index as well as number one in suicide rates? Well, there you go. It tells you how hypocritical and nonsensical these indices are. The happiness index is propaganda. It's Western propaganda. That's all it is. How can you have the highest suicide rates and also be the happiest nation in the world? Makes no sense whatsoever. It tells you these indices cannot be trusted. They cannot be. You should not take them seriously. It's merely propaganda. Okay, what other? I can take a couple more questions. McLevin says, we are having a lot of meetings with Bhutan. Is there something cooking? Well, I cannot tell you about it. Definitely, you're right. Lots of meetings. The king of Bhutan comes here every couple of months. The defense minister comes and meets our defense minister. Something is cooking, perhaps. But what it is, well, who knows? Who knows? Brijesh says coaching centers like IITs for IITs, etc., are becoming suicide centers. Why is the government of India not taking action? Because it's a huge industry. The education industry is a huge industry with lots of entrenched interests, and where there's huge amounts of money, you have political interests and all, and it's just the way it is. So, look, this is all wrong. What's happening in India, right? The entire education system, I've spoken about it at length. It's rotten. It's useless for the country. It doesn't give us what it's supposed to give. So in my opinion, the whole system has to be revamped. Why is the government not doing it? I don't know. And I'm not going to shed any more tears over that. They're not doing it. They're not doing it. There's nothing I can do about it. So, but you are right. It's terrible. It's terrible. So much pressure on young kids. It's absolutely terrible, and it's a tragedy when a young child, young person, you know, feels so cornered and optionless that they feel that it's easier to just escape in this manner. It's terrible. It's terrible. Okay. Amisha says, "Why do we dream? And do you believe in reincarnation?" I don't know about reincarnation. Okay, I don't. There's no evidence, scientific evidence about reincarnation. But is it possible? Well, one can have an open mind about that. So I'm agnostic about it, I would say. Why do we dream? We're not quite sure why we dream. There are various theories. One theory is that dreaming helps our brain make sense of information and reconfigure information while we sleep. Okay, so we have experiences during our waking hours, but we sleep, let's say, roughly 8 hours a day on average for the average person. And during that sleep period is very important for our mind, for our brain, because the brain needs that. If you deprive a person of sleep for a certain number of days, you can even die. That person can even die, and that person will die if you deprive that person of sleep for an extended period of time, 7-10 days. uh, so the brain needs sleep, and sleep is extremely important for the brain's functioning. Why, we don't quite know, but one theory is that the brain reconfigures memories and experiences and puts them in the right places and makes connections with previous experiences, etc., and this manifests itself in the form of dreams. And once again, there are recurring dreams and all which don't quite make sense, and also we don't quite know very well. The brain is the least understood organ of the body. The mind is even less understood, in consciousness, it's a mystery. Yeah, so very deep and profound question you've asked, but the scientific world doesn't have clear answers for these things. It tells you how little we understand of our own mind and our body. And with Amisha's question, I'm going to end today's live stream. Lots of more questions, but it's time to end it for today. Thank you, everybody, for all the questions, and we'll do this once again next week. All right, until then, take care. Keep asking questions and keep raising your standards. See you soon. Bye.